I mean, I see more insane people in the TV world than I have in his world. I mean, you know.
Because I'd never lived with anyone, and I didn't want to because I didn't know if it was worth it.
Valerie Bertinelli and Eddie Van Halen were once considered the quintessential couple of the 1980s, embodying two major pinnacles of American entertainment, television and rock. After nearly 3 decades together, they separated quietly. The truth behind their split remained buried for almost 20 years, until now, as Valerie Bertinelli finally reveals the reason their marriage fell apart, and it is darker than the public ever imagined. I knew the man for 40 years. I was 20 when I met him. I still loved him. Valerie Bertinelli met Eddie Van Halen in 1980, when she was already a familiar face on television as Barbara Cooper in the series One Day at a Time. At the time, Valerie's career was steady, and her image was tied to the label of Hollywood's good girl. Eddie Van Halen, on the other hand, was the frontman of the rock band Van Halen, dominating the charts with hits like Jump, Panama, and a series of sold-out world tours. The two came into each other's lives from opposite worlds, one from family-friendly television, the other from the wild realm of rock music. Their first meeting took place after an interview, where Eddie was immediately drawn to Valerie's radiant presence and smile. The couple quickly began dating, and just a few months later, on April 11, 1981, they were officially married. The wedding was a private affair in California, but it still made waves in the entertainment world due to the stark contrast between the two. At that time, Eddie had just completed the album Fair Warning, one of Van Halen's most intense works, while Valerie continued her weekly appearances on national television. Their demanding work schedules left little time for one another, but Valerie often accompanied Eddie on tour, striving to reconcile the chaotic rock lifestyle with traditional married life. It's like the way Elizabeth Barrett would say, "Wolfie, Wolfie, and I'm pregnant." In 1991, they welcomed their first son, Wolfgang Van Halen. Valerie once shared in an interview that Wolfgang's birth was the best thing that had ever happened to her, and also a final attempt to keep the family together. So I had a million girls' names, but I just had Wolfgang and he totally fits his name. She stepped back from long-term projects, prioritized time with her son, and tried to balance the roles of mother, wife, and public figure. Raising a child while her husband maintained the life of a high-profile rocker was no easy task. Valerie once described this period as living 2 lives under one roof. Eddie continued his erratic lifestyle, often missing important family moments, while Valerie struggled alone to hold everything together. Throughout the 1990s, the effort to preserve their home life persisted. Valerie didn't leave Eddie even as he began to face serious health issues. They never publicly discussed their difficulties and continued to appear together at major events as a normal family. Behind the scenes, though, their relationship had already begun to fracture. In October 20th, 2001, Valerie and Eddie confirmed their separation. 6 years later, on December 20th, 2007, their divorce was finalized. After 26 years together, they parted ways without any public drama. Valerie maintained her silence during the post-divorce period. She continued working in television, published cookbooks, and raised her son in what she considered the most stable environment possible. Eddie remained in the shadows, grappling with health problems and a career that was no longer at its peak. At the time, no one could predict that nearly 2 decades later, it would be Valerie who would reopen the door to the past and reveal the true reason she could no longer remain in that marriage. The secrets revealed in 2008 through her first memoir, Losing It. She mentioned for the first time what truly happened behind closed doors. Eddie was addicted to cocaine for most of their time together. Drank daily as a habit and often spiraled out of control. Valerie never denied the love she had for her husband, but she admitted that she gradually became someone living with the addiction, no longer a true life partner. One particularly striking detail was Eddie's refusal to quit smoking even after being diagnosed with mouth cancer. Valerie revealed that he had 1/3 of his tongue surgically removed, but still continued to smoke and consume hard liquor. She described it as a form of slow self-destruction. "I loved his soul," she wrote, "but I hated his alcohol and drugs, not him." The pain didn't come only from addiction. Valerie admitted to having an affair during a fractured phase in their marriage. The reason, according to her, was a prolonged feeling of abandonment. "I just want to feel affection, to be cared for by someone," she wrote in Losing It, "and I couldn't find that in my own home." Eddie also had affairs, especially while on tour. Both of them lived in silent opposition, neither speaking fully about it, but also no longer able to hold on. In the early 2000s, Valerie's mental state collapsed. She developed an eating disorder, gained weight uncontrollably, and gradually withdrew from public appearances. In a later interview with Oprah, she admitted that after the separation, she spent most of her time at home, avoiding friends and relatives, focusing solely on raising her son. "I lost control inside and out. It wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the end of the illusion that love could save someone." In 2022, through her second memoir, Enough Already, Valerie expanded her perspective. By then, she had regained clarity after years of therapy and sobriety. What she wrote no longer carried a defensive tone, but full acceptance. She called the marriage with Eddie beautiful but ravaged, saying they came together too young, too unprepared, and without the tools to handle fame, addiction, and isolation. She also admitted that she tried to play the role of a strong wife, but it was only a facade to avoid being judged. In 2024, after watching Behind the Music documentary by Wolfgang Van Halen, their son, Valerie posted a video that drew widespread attention on Instagram. In it, she clearly stated for the first time that Eddie was not her soulmate, as she once believed. "I was in love with an idealized version of him. I was ready to play the grieving widow. But the truth is we hadn't been a couple for 20 years. She added, "Watching my son's pain made me realize that staying silent is no longer the right choice." Her statement sparked public debate. Some praised Valerie for her courage to speak the truth, especially as addiction remains taboo in the entertainment world. Others argued that revisiting the past of someone who has passed away could tarnish the legendary image Eddie left behind. Valerie didn't push back. Instead, she emphasized, "I'm not sharing this to diminish anyone. I'm sharing it so people like me don't have to stay silent." In doing so, she turned her story from a high-profile divorce into a testimony for those who have lived in the shadows of damaging relationships. Still, one aspect that can easily be misunderstood is that her account might lead the public to believe there was no harmony in their marriage, when in reality they maintained connection even after everything had ended, an unbreakable bond. Although the marriage between Valerie Bertinelli and Eddie Van Halen officially ended in 2007, they remain in contact and maintain a certain level of respect, particularly for their son Wolfgang, whom both considered the center of their lives. There were no lawsuits after the divorce, no public disputes over property. Their relationship quietly continued in a different form, no longer husband and wife, but never truly estranged. At Wolfgang's major events, Valerie and Eddie still appear together, fulfilling their roles as parents. Wolfgang joined Van Halen as the bassist in 2006, replacing Michael Anthony. The decision sparked debate among fans, but both Eddie and Valerie gave their full support. Valerie once shared, "Even though we're no longer a traditional family, we're still a team for Wolfie." When Eddie began battling severe complications from throat cancer in 2019, Valerie was among those frequently visiting the hospital alongside Wolfgang. Eddie's final days were quiet without media presence. Surrounded only by family and closest friends, Valerie was at his bedside when he took his last breath on October 6, 2020. In a message posted to Instagram that same day, she wrote, 35 years ago, my life changed forever when I met you, and today I'm grateful I got to be with you in your final moment." What stood out was the way Valerie expressed her emotions after Eddie's passing. Though she had not been his legal wife for over a decade, she still referred to herself as someone in mourning. The way she wrote and spoke about Eddie conveyed a grief not just for a lost love, but for a part of her past that had now permanently closed. Numerous media outlets acknowledged the sincerity in the way she commemorated Eddie. In her 2022 memoir, Enough Already, Valerie described Eddie's final days as full of sorrow but also peaceful. She recalled that the two exchanged words of love one last time. "I think he knew I forgave him. I also hope he forgave me." It was the first time she made it clear that although they could not live together, a form of love still remained between them, no longer romantic but never completely faded. Still, the closeness she showed after Eddie's death also drew mixed reactions from the public. Some accuse her of trying to step back into the spotlight using the image of her late ex-husband, a legendary musician. The criticism grew louder after her 2024 video in which Valerie asserted that Eddie was not my soulmate and that they hadn't really been a couple in 20 years. In response to this, Valerie did not publicly defend herself. She simply posted a short message on social media. "There are things I stayed silent about for too long, not out of fear of public opinion, but because I wasn't sure I fully understood them myself. Now I just want to speak the truth as part of my healing." Valerie's approach was not one of melancholic remembrance. She did not portray herself as a grieving widow. Instead, she chose to honor Eddie through the most honest lens, as a great artist, a devoted father, and a man who fought his own demons. Wolfgang has also mentioned on several occasions that his mother always encouraged him to see both the strengths and the flaws of his father, so he could rise above them, not replicate them. After Eddie Van Halen's passing, Valerie Bertinelli entered a critical period of transition. While the public often referred to her as the former wife of a rock legend, Valerie continued living her own life, facing new challenges in her personal relationships, new paths after marriage. One of those paths was her second marriage to Tom Vitale, a financial planner she once believed would mark a hopeful new beginning. Valerie and Tom Vitale married on January 1st, 2011, after years of dating. The wedding took place in Malibu, with Eddie and Wolfgang in attendance. At the time, the media described it as a rare example of a modern family in the entertainment industry. Valerie believed that things would be different this time. She took lessons from her previous marriage and aimed to build a relationship on a more mature foundation. But over the years, differences in lifestyle and personal values began to surface. By the end of 2021, Valerie filed for legal separation, citing irreconcilable differences. In an Instagram post, she wrote, "I used to believe that if I loved enough, everything could be fixed, but that's not how it works. I gave too much in both marriages, and I realized I was never loved back the way I hoped to be." After the divorce, Valerie didn't immediately return to work or public appearances. During 2022 to 2023, she spent most of her time writing the memoir Enough Already, adjusting her daily routine and focusing on therapy. It was also during this period that she announced she had stopped drinking, committing to sobriety for the sake of her mental health. In later interviews, she admitted to living in a prolonged state of anxiety and learning how to say no to things that drained her. In March 20th, 24, Valerie went public with a new relationship with writer Mike Goodenough. They met through social media, bonded over pop culture and writing, and gradually grew close. The couple appeared together at the Daytime Emmy Awards in June, drawing attention as it was the first time in years Valerie publicly introduced a new partner. Fans embraced the relationship, seeing it as a sign of healing and moving forward. However, by November 20th, 24, Valerie confirmed their breakup in an Instagram post. She didn't go into detail, but mentioned that the reason stemmed from external factors rather than a lack of affection. Mike later also spoke up, stating that the relationship with Valerie had been the best part of his year and that he respected the mutual decision to part ways. By March 20th, 25, Valerie addressed the reasons more clearly. "I've been in 2 marriages where I tried too hard hoping to be loved unconditionally. Eventually, I realized that loving others can't be a way to fill the emptiness within myself." This statement received widespread support, especially from middle-aged women who related to her journey of recovery after divorce. Outside of her romantic life, Valerie also faced challenges with mental health. In November 20th, 24, she publicly shared her experience with a severe anxiety episode that forced her to pause work for several weeks. Without masking it or skirting around the truth, she said plainly, "I used to be afraid of admitting I was tired, but the truth is I can't keep pretending to be okay." Afterward, she actively joined mental health advocacy efforts, becoming one of the few candid and honest voices in the entertainment industry on the subject. No longer portraying the ideal TV star or the perfect wife, Valerie chose instead to represent herself as she truly was, a woman who had endured enough to understand that living authentically matters more than preserving appearances. Though she had loved, been disappointed, and attempted to start over multiple times, she didn't hide her failures. Instead, she embraced them as part of her journey. She said, Rather than finding someone to make me happy, I'm learning to take responsibility for my own emotions, and that is a choice completely different from what she made in either of her previous marriages. Now at 65, Valerie Bertinelli no longer shows up with the labels of Eddie Van Halen's ex-wife or 1980s TV star. She has stepped away from old definitions, presenting herself as a woman living truthfully and on her own terms. Life after the spotlight. At the end of 2023, Valerie's home cooking concluded after 8 seasons on air. Around the same time, she stepped down from her role on Kids Baking Championship, a decision that Valerie described as difficult to accept but necessary. In an interview with E! Online, she admitted that being removed from the show deeply hurt her, especially after being part of it for nearly a decade. Rather than respond with bitterness, she accepted it as a natural part of change. In September 20th, 24, Valerie returned to television as a lifestyle contributor on The Drew Barrymore Show. This time, she was neither a chef nor the lead in a talk show. Instead, she spoke about healthy habits, managing stress, staying grounded, and most importantly, learning how to talk to oneself. Most of the topics centered on what Valerie called post-divorce emotional wellness, a relatively unfamiliar concept that was increasingly resonating with middle-aged viewers. On social media, Valerie also shifted focus. From a feed once filled with professional updates, her Instagram evolved into a personal space where she shared honest reflections on anxiety, emotional recovery, and even days when she couldn't get out of bed. In November 20th, 24, she posted a video documenting a panic attack with the caption, "I'm sharing this because I know I'm not the only one going through it." The raw sincerity struck a chord, garnering millions of views and tens of thousands of grateful comments. Her relationship with her son Wolfgang remains a key anchor. They frequently appear together during special occasions. In early 2025, Valerie made a surprise appearance. At one of Wolfgang's concerts, offered a brief message and stepped off stage. She joked, "I'll never join my son's band, but I'm his #1 fan." Their bond, close and non-intrusive, is what Valerie calls the clearest accomplishment of my life. On April 23rd, 2025, on her 65th birthday, she posted, "I've been through enough to know the light at the end of the tunnel doesn't come from someone else. It appears when you stop and turn toward yourself." A simple sentence, it reveals a completely new Valerie, no longer striving to please, no longer chasing what's out of reach. Valerie has announced retirement, but she's made no plans for a regular return to television. At this stage, Valerie Bertinelli no longer needs anyone's validation for what she has endured. She just needs to know she's no longer acting, and to her, that is enough. Valerie Bertinelli's story isn't just about divorce. It's a journey of breaking free from expectations, from roles, and from the illusions once tied to love. Looking back at the journey of Eddie Van Halen and Valerie Bertinelli, they were once considered one of the most influential couples of the 1980s in American pop culture. Eddie, as the lead guitarist of Van Halen, was hailed by industry experts as a revolutionary force in modern rock music. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2007 with the band, and was regularly listed among the top names on greatest guitarists of all-time rankings. His signature tapping style left a lasting impact on generations of musicians. Valerie Bertinelli, meanwhile, built a long-standing name in television through a role in One Day at a Time, earning 2 Golden Globe Awards. She later transitioned into food television, winning 2 Emmys for Valerie's home cooking. While her career didn't spark the same global sensation as Eddie's, Valerie maintained a steady, scandal-free presence and earned the trust of multiple generations of TV audiences. Their pairing, one a music icon, the other a beloved television figure, was once dubbed by Entertainment Weekly as an iconic marriage of American rock and TV. Even though the relationship didn't last, their legacies endure. Eddie is remembered as a music legend, while Valerie has become a symbol of resilience and authenticity in entertainment. Each in their own way left an irreplaceable imprint in their field. One reshaped rock music, the other exemplified the perseverance of women in television, Eddie Van Halen and Valerie Bertinelli. Though their marriage didn't last, each left behind a distinct and memorable legacy. Do you view their relationship as a lesson in sacrifice or a reflection of love's limits under pressure? And after everything, what part of their story stays with you the most? Leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe for more in-depth portraits of Hollywood's most remarkable lives.